All right, very good. And as we're getting started, also, Angelo, I want to make sure you see our two new commissioners that are just joining us tonight for the first time in the capacity of commissioners.
All right. Hello, and welcome to the City of Salem's Human Rights Commission. My name is Angela Arredondo. I am the chair. I live in Ward 2, and my pronouns are he and him. And as Gretchen mentioned, we do introductions. I do popcorn style. I just call. And then we'll start with a new commissioner, Kelsey.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelsey Murray. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a new commissioner, and I believe I'm in Ward 2.
Very good. Awesome. And then you're invited to invite the next person to introduce themselves.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Mike, you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Mike Waters. I live in Ward 7, and my pronouns are they, them, theirs. I almost forgot the next part. I'll call on Oni.
How do I know you're going to call on me, Mike? Hi, my name is Oni Marchbanks. I'm in Ward 6. My pronouns are she and her. And I'm going to call on Ryan.
Yes. Hey, my name is Ryan Botkin. Pronouns are he, him, his. I'm interning with the City of Salem, and I go to Corbin University. And with that, I'll just pass it on to Kathy.
Hi everyone, my name is Kathy Ostrand-Ponchin. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a new commission member. I was formally appointed, I think, at the end of February, but was not able to attend the last meeting, so I'm happy to be here. David.
Hi, my name is David Reinholdt. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm a resident of Polk County, and I'll pass it on to Lee.
Leah. She or hers. My name is Leah. I just moved here from Phoenix, but I was only there for a couple months because I came from San Diego. I'm a social worker and just trying to get to know my community a little bit better. So, and I will call on who hasn't gone. Let me see. Oh, Tricarica?
Yes,
Tricarica.
Good job. I'm Tricarica. My pronouns are they, them, and theirs, and I'm a resident of Ward 2. And it looks like Nathan just popped on, so Nathan can introduce himself next.
Hello, can you guys see me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm off my phone now. I'm Nathan. I'm a resident of Ward, I think it's 7. And I use he, him, his pronouns. And I'll pass it to, I gotta look who. David, have you gone yet? I'll pass it to David then.
Okay. I think the only one who hasn't gone is Gretchen.
Yeah, I think everybody's gone, and I am Gretchen, staff to the commission, she, her, hers, and I live in Ward 8.
All right, thank you. And then since we're at Gretchen, do you have any public comment?
There was one that was received in written form. I know you got 1 million documents in your packet, and I appreciate that. This one was the one that I noted that came in as public comment, distinct from the input that was coming in as a result of the mayor's motion and your recommendation to council. And it related to the city council and legislative committee, and it was from a community member named Linnell Wilcox. But there's no additional public comment that's been received.
Thank you. We can move on to the consent calendar. And Gretchen, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have to approve 2, right? 2 consent calendars?
Actually, you can take it as one. Oh, wait a minute. Did we not have a quorum in March? Is that what?
No, that's why we had that super short meeting.
You did a good job. Yeah, so I think we're approving the minutes from the last 2 meetings. You can take it all in one motion, one action. You can motion to approve the consent calendar, but thank you for noting that, Angelo. I should have noted that on the agenda. You're approving the last 2 meeting minutes as well as the agenda, if my memory serves me.
Yeah, so whenever you're ready, I need a motion to approve the agenda and the minutes for the last, is it the last two meetings then?
All right,
move
I motion to
up-
approve.
I'll second.
All right,
All right, all those in favor say aye or raise your hand. Okay, any opposed? All right, motion passes. We can move on to number 4, action and our discussion items. And then Gretchen, bias crime update. I don't see Lieutenant Aguilar.
Yes, that's correct. She asked me to extend her apologies. She had an important family commitment that was scheduled much prior to the date and so is unable to personally be here tonight, but asks me to share her apologies. And then she's provided me the bias crime report. So we had 2 bias crimes reported into Salem Police Department since the last meeting. The first situation on March 17th in Southeast Salem, a juvenile reported being pushed down by an unknown adult suspect. The suspect used anti-Asian slurs against the victim, both prior to and after shoving the victim. There were no suspect leads at this time. And then a second one, March 22nd. Note, there's not been a police report taken on this yet. However, this would be documented as a bias crime should the victim choose to move forward with an investigation. Northeast Salem, victim reported finding a baseball bat with racial slurs, anti-Black, on the bat next to their vehicle at their place of work. They're the only Black employee at this business. And the victim was unsure how they will proceed at this time. So those are the 2 situations that I'm conscious of and have from Debbie.
Thank you. Any questions on those? Okay, Gretchen, complaints / concerns of discrimination.
You know, I had a couple of people tell me that they were talking with someone about the possibility of turning something in, but I don't have anything direct. So I don't have anything actually received since the last reporting period. But I've answered some general questions about our process and expressed, you know, openness to being able to talk with people should they be interested.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the big one, recommendations to City Council. Everybody should have received, as Gretchen said, like 1 million documents, but they're important. And I think Gretchen recommended if you guys had on hand 3 documents, is that correct, Gretchen?
Mm-hmm.
Which was the cover letter to council, let's see, discussion questions, and then I'm missing one more, Gretchen. Which one was it?
The other one is the draft recommendations. So the cover letter, the very first word on the document that's called cover letter has date in parentheses, and then it says Mayor Bennett, members of the council. So it's written as sort of a cover letter to go on top of the recommendations. That's what cover letter looks like. The second document that I've nicknamed recommendations begins with just the question that you're all answering. And then it says Human Rights Commission recommended actions. So that's the document that we've nicknamed recommendations. And then the third document just says discussion questions for today's meeting. So if that helps as we toggle, I imagine we'll be toggling like, okay, go to the cover letter, go to the recommendation. So it might help to get grounded in each of these documents for a moment.
Yeah, then I was gonna ask, would anybody benefit from Gretchen sharing her screen with those documents? Or do you just want to look at your own, you know, screen?
Just because no one else is commenting, I find it fine to look at my own screen and toggle back to the group. I like seeing people's faces and reactions to things, but I am just one.
Same as Mike. If someone feels like they would rather have the screen sharing, then I'm open to that, but I am fine looking at my own screen.
I'm fine with that too. I have the documents up, so I don't need to have the screen shared.
All right, looks like majority is okay with just looking at the documents on their own screen. You can do that. And then we can start with the cover letter. Does anybody have any comments, questions on that?
Oni, was it okay that I quoted you? Like, you probably recognize some of your words in it, but
Yeah, it's fine. Thank you.
cool. Yeah.
Actually, I think the first question I should have asked was, have you guys read the document? Because that's important to understanding the document. Yeah. It's okay if you haven't. You can, read it right now, but I'm just wondering.
So are you saying we're not in trouble if we didn't read it?
Correct, Ellie. You can read it right now if that's okay with me.
Oh, Tricarico, you're quoted in there too. I just realized. Is that okay? Good. I tried to take some liberties. I really enjoyed getting to talk with so many of you, and I think in different places you might recognize your words or your thoughts. It's truly a weaving of a variety of conversations, and so you might go, "Oh, that's me," and recognize that. So if anybody finds they don't care for that, or of course in the aggregate, I was working to blend kind of a variety of inputs and perspectives, and so if that's the purpose of today's conversation. If it's not hit the mark, we must edit. And you don't have a precise deadline. Just that might be another thing to remember as you're proceeding. The mayor and city council didn't ask for input by a specific date. I think there was some interest by the commission in not taking too long. But of course you want to take long enough to be comfortable with what you're submitting. So that might be helpful to think about too. Or you could always offer an initial offering. And in some cases, that's what this is, with the idea that there may be additional ideas that come in the future. I think that's kind of what we tried to do, with setting it up that way, that this is the beginning of an ongoing dialogue.
I also think that it's important to note that what is it? Why am I blanking?
Probably
the budget. Yes,
yep.
The budget deadline is coming up. That's in June. Is that when you have to vote by?
The city adopts a budget. They're required to have an adopted budget by the end of the fiscal year. So in June, city council will adopt a budget. One unique thing about this year is that we're going to be receiving the, what is it called? It's nicknamed ARPA already, and I can't think of the name, the American Promise Recovery Act funds, maybe something like that. And tonight at the budget committee, I know there's going to be discussion that includes how some of those dollars appear to need to go to certain parts of the budget based on the guidance that's come out. But there's about 16.2 million total, 8.1 coming up in the short term, and then I think another 8.1 in the next iteration, where we don't have the rules yet until May. And those dollars don't have to be spent until 2024. And so there's going to be some conversations about those dollars that can extend past June 30. So that might be helpful to understand. There could be some flexibility in that.
Yeah, and hopefully some of those dollars go to the Human Rights Commission. I hope, and it's my plan, because for what I understand, with this initial draft of the agenda of the budget, there's nothing relating to, us, we can say, quote unquote us.
Yes, that's correct. It's following the status quo, which is the status quo is the Human Rights Commission is a part of the mayor and city council budget. So as there's been specific expenses, we've paid for things out of the mayor, council, city manager budget, but we don't have a a distinct line item with funds for activities. So yeah, that's correct. And I think that's included in this recommendation, is to fund a specific line item for the Human Rights Commission. So in the meantime, like when we have supplies or, you know, if there's a fee, we've been taking it just from that because I am an employee through the mayor and city manager's office and work with you. So it's just kind of embedded in that broader budget.
The only question I had was, do we have, and maybe this is thinking too far ahead, but is there anything in there that specifically requests additional dialogue from city council or follow-up, or, you know, I don't want to like put a deadline, like you have to talk to us, but I really want to drive home that we do want to know how they're going to address each of these things, because it is a lot and we want to keep supporting them through that. So I don't know if there's a way to word that succinctly. Or if that's more proactive on our side. I know Angela has talked a lot about facilitating those relationships with city council and going to their meetings. Maybe that's more on our side, but I do want to make sure that's in there too.
Thank you. Good question. So let's take a look at the cover letter and take a look at the list where it says we have questions for the city, and let's see if that's reflected strongly enough there. Let's see. Number 5, for example, please talk to us about these. What work is currently underway and what opportunities for improvement remain? How can we help? Number 6, please identify persons to talk with HRC about the development of all recommendations in the document. We want to learn what plans are underway and what issues are experienced. I don't know if that reflects what you're looking for, or if you'd like to add something maybe to clarify it better.
No, I think that.
Oh, we
Sorry.
lost you.
Sorry, I hit unmute mute too soon. I think that covers it, and hopefully, you know, they'll honor that request.
And I think it says it up in earlier in the beginning of the cover letter, the paragraph that starts with "We don't know what we don't know." We mean to express these recommendations and invite dialogue. I mean, to me, that's what that was getting to as well, is we're wanting to this to be kind of the first step and how that can continue a conversation.
Yep.
I just have a comment that I think that the cover letter as it's written has a really good tone, and it leaves it very open-ended. And I thought that the recommendations were pretty thorough and comprehensive. And I do think it will take more dialogue with the city and with our group to kind of get from that big list of recommendations to what can actually be achieved. And so I'm really comfortable with the work at where it's at, and don't have any further comments to make or questions.
Yeah, we can also start looking at the Human Rights Commission recommended actions, that giant document as well. And you can start, you know, any questions and comments on that one as well. I think it's divided into great sections. Like we have the adopt, celebrate, communications, all that. And it's very specific on the actions that we want to be taken. So that's what I like about the document.
Is anything on here that creates heartburn, or that you would prefer it phrased differently?
For the first bullet point under dismantle, I don't know if we want to like clarify where it says hire people certified in disability practices. Do we want to say like disability best practices? That might be a clarification thing.
Thank you. There was some discussion about the term BIPOC being a term that some identify with and perhaps some don't. Are we comfortable with the term, or is there a different phrasing there that would be more appropriate?
You know, this is Oni Marchbanks, Ward 6. I always say Black and BIPOC, just to, I guess, just to have a presence in the conversation to remind you that not to erase race. So I always use the term Black and BIPOC.
Thank you. Is there any objection, or I could make that switch? Will do. Can I ask you a dumb question, Oni? I think people will tell me, what does the B stand for in BIPOC if I pull out, if I say Black and BIPOC? How do you answer that question? How should I answer that question?
You know, so it varies depending on where you're at, like depending on what geographical location you're at. So what does the B stand for? It could be biracial.
Oh yeah. Thank you.
It could
yeah,
be
it's an assumption
beautiful.
that B stands for. I'm talking over you. I apologize. I get it though. Yeah, I'm assuming B stands for Black, but it may not. It may.
Right,
It depends on.
I'm sorry. And so what I've noticed as I show up in these rooms and have these conversations is that sometimes when there's services or resources allocated to the BIPOC community, I've noticed that it doesn't necessarily mean the Black community.
Gotcha. So this specifically identifies. Got it. Other areas of concern. I know we have the discussion questions, and so you can go there too.
I feel similar about this document. Every time I look for something to add, I find it somewhere else in the document. I think we did a good job and particularly thanks to Tricarico and Oni for the initial work that they did, because I think a lot of it was captured very early on. And we've only added things that are more juicy and interesting. And I really like it.
Well, if you like, we could go to the discussion questions. There were 6 that were sort of lifted. Different people had different suggestions of things to flag for conversation at the meeting. So the first one, for a draft human rights budget, for example, I think I did put in under fund and recommendations, I did offer an example. Somebody had suggested categories, I think in our discussion earlier. Creative, so what's written right now is under fund, and it says create a budget for the Human Rights Commission to provide resources for outreach, training, and specific projects. I don't know if you want to leave that as it's written, or if you'd like to add specificity. Or if that's adequate for now, and then we should be working on it, because the logical next question will be, well, how much, do you think you need?
Yeah, I think, in my opinion, that one's adequate for now, and then that's when we continue, the work. Like just giving that, number of how much. That's just my opinion, though. If anybody else has any other thoughts on that question.
I think it's fine the way it's worded right now, but I do anticipate they're going to want to know, okay, so what specific projects do you have in mind? And so as we can talk about that.
Great. So at the moment, I'll put it on for the next meeting agenda, and maybe folks can be thinking thoughts as we proceed. It just occurred to me as I was trying to look for the human rights bullet and point you there, maybe I should restructure this document to have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or something, or do you think it's okay with bullets? Maybe it's not big enough to justify maybe it's not big enough, I don't know. Like it's nice to be able to point to, 2A or 3C, but on the other hand, I guess it's not that big.
Since it's like an easy fix, I think it might be for readability. I think it might be good. And I think if like folks are using like readers, they can read that off rather than just the bullet points. So that might be helpful.
Great idea. I'll switch to some way of like either 1, 2, 3s or ABCs or something. Angela, do you want to take us through the rest of the discussion questions, or would you like me to?
I can do it. Also, an answer to number 1 would be, I believe during the last intersectional task force meeting, Mike said that he was hoping that the Human Rights Commission budget was for the Safe Spaces project. Correct, Mike?
Yeah, we definitely have an opportunity if we're interested in pitching a budget. We have done some more work on the program idea, and we know kind of what the specific budget items were. One of them was to pay an artist from one of the communities that we serve to actually create the decal for us. And it was important to us that the person be paid and that it not be a contest or anything like that, but that we're actually supporting community through that. The other was just for the physical items themselves, the decals that businesses would get, any kind of packets. Having a dog moment. 1 second.
Would you like me to add maybe that into the recommendations document as an example of a project?
Yeah, that would be a really good example.
I think another example we could put is training. When people come in and do presentations and training to us, I think if we're going to demand that the city pay for that, we should put our money where our mouth is and pay people to come in and train us too, right? Like we've been lucky that we've had some commissioners already on the council who are willing to volunteer their time, but it'd be nice to bring in people and pay people for that. Because it's a lot of emotional energy to talk about some of the things that we talk about.
Absolutely. Do you think that in recommendations under fund, under bullet number 4, that's expressed? Maybe I should say including at commission meetings or something to help strengthen that.
Yeah, I'm more meaning when we request our budget, that would be, yeah, that would be part of it. Because we're already telling them to do that. And that would be another example for us to include in our examples along with the safe spaces requests.
Yep. Yeah, got it. Got it. Thank you.
All right, I think for now we can move on to the second question, which reads as follows. One suggestion was to establish focus commissions for specific identities, such as a disabilities commission and others. Do we recommend this, or do we recommend HRC is bigger instead?
I thought about that just because we have the so I have Animal Kingdom tonight. Just because we have the LGBTQIA intersectional task force, I think it can be a challenge for the smaller groups for participation. So I think it really needs to be the community that informs whether there are specific commissions, whether there's enough community interest, enough people who are willing to participate. I do think one of the things that I see over and over again in our documents is removing barriers to participation. And I think that's really important because, it's hard to show up to meetings when you have to work or you've got other obligations. So I would just suggest maybe that we wouldn't create focus commissions in a rote way, but that we ask the community what types of commissions would best represent them and whether they have the resources to be able to participate in those types of commissions. That was just my thinking on that.
I'm wondering, could we have them start as task forces, and then if there was enough interest, that would help propel them into their own thing? Like, we could later make that recommendation, because that would be a great way to get the community involved, and then they can kind of be part of that process of developing it and getting it going, because we have community members on our task force already, so.
That's a great point. Much like sometimes organizations incubate new projects and then they develop and merge and become nonprofits and spin out and be their own. For example, maybe the Human Rights Commission incubates a task force that ends up its own commission someday or something. I don't know if that's the right way to talk about it, but.
Yeah, exactly. Because, they can start working with us to get a feel for what it's like to be on a commission and learn all that stuff. Because I know I had to learn a lot when I joined. And then once they get more comfortable, we can support them in becoming their own commission if they feel that's the path they want to take, or they could be a part of the HRC.
So if that's the consensus of the group, maybe that's just the experience. And then we just note that at some point in the future, perhaps we're going to be making a recommendation like that. And then maybe also there's a question to the community, as Mike said, around like, what do you want to get involved with? What topics would you want to, and would you have the resource to stand up? Maybe that's a task for us to work on for a while, is how we would message that to the community and invite engagement. And yeah, that's interesting. That might be one for our work plan, maybe, rather than ready for a recommendation to council at this stage.
I also think there's a piece where the city has to resource it. Because again, these are all volunteer commissions. People in our various communities deal with all sorts of challenges. And to be involved in a volunteer commission is quite a lot of work. So what can the city provide as support to those commissions? Gretchen, you're wonderful, but you're only one. And sometimes I worry that we have big ideas and big goals, but there isn't enough resource at the city to really meet all those objectives.
That's a great point. That's a very good point. We should be taking that into account. What is our resource and our capacity? So I don't know if that leads into a recommendation that you'd be ready to make that we should add to the recommendations document, or if it's something we want to think about. You could always develop the idea for a while, and then if a group emerges, maybe the recommendation comes with a request for resources at that time. That might be one way to approach it.
That could be part of the communication plan too, of like, hey, we want to build these additional task, what's the tongue twister? Task force groups, I don't know. And, we want you involved, what support do you need to make that possible? And how can we support you? Because I think a lot of people want to get involved with stuff, but like Mike said, sometimes there's reasons why they can't. So opening up that dialogue could be really helpful.
I would love to learn more about that. I know when I was newer to the city, there was a conversation around just dismantling, dominant culture norms and meetings. And I never felt like I adequately knew what that looked like exactly. I felt like I had some blind spots in that area. And that's a really good example, to me, of what can we learn from the community as we're talking with them about what, it gets back to that removing barriers point that Mike made too.
Or any more discussion on question 2? Okay, it sounds like we're gonna go ahead and develop the idea more. That's the consensus I'm getting from the silence. So I think we can move on to number 3, which says, please see the section in the recommendations document titled Dismantle. How can we develop this section? Can we be more specific with some of the items?
Did we ever include something about having specific paid positions in the city to to represent and look at specific groups, sort of like the LGBTQIA plus focused analyst position with the city of Portland? Because this kind of speaks to some of the stuff Mike brought up of like, there's only one Gretchen. And, it'd be awesome if we could have people similar to your role that represented some of these different groups that we're trying to help, right? And that also speaks to the representation piece, because if someone can start in a position like Gretchen's, then they potentially get the training and experience to be in more of a leadership role later on as well. So it could be, paid positions where they are supporting us, supporting, a specific commission for a specific community. Because if the demographics at the city are all the same, they're not going to be able to answer these questions. They're not going to know what to dismantle. I mean, and I wouldn't know what to dismantle right away, right? There's only so much I can see because of my experience. But if I had someone with a different experience than me coming in and saying, hey, this is a barrier to me, I can't do this, or I'm hearing in my community that this is a barrier, that can be really powerful.
Yeah, I agree. And I thought we did put in the document. Did we take out Gretchen, or did we just not agree on?
I hope you'll forgive me. I was getting these message pop-ups when you were talking, and I found them distracting, so I took a moment and shut it off. And I feel like I missed part of what you said. I did hear your point about hire staff. Like, it could be an idea to hire positions that are focused on particular communities and identities. And is the question, did we take that out, or did I miss part of what you said?
Yeah, I was wondering if that was in there because I'm trying to skim really quick and see.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember too.
And I'm not sure I'm seeing it, but maybe I missed it.
Yeah, and I had the exact same question because I'm reading it as well, and I can't see it either. And I thought we kind of agreed to include that as well. But I just can't find it on the document.
You know, I think you're right.
I mean, it's a lot, so I'm not surprised that there's things that we haven't quite captured because I know it was a lot to get all in one document.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that, Grace. So under fund, you could do fund or support. Yeah, I struggled a little bit with the difference between those two sections, but would you like me to put under fund, fund staff positions with focus to particular identity communities that represent and reflect who's in Salem, something along those lines?
Yeah.
Yeah, that did come up in several conversations that I had with folks.
I think going back to specificity, I'm wondering, yeah, if we do want to at least provide some examples of what we were trying to get at, such as like the cultural practices that exclude BIPOC folks. So that we are kind of like guiding them in the right direction, so that they kind of know where to at least start. So I don't know if folks who were introduced those have ideas of things that they were thinking could help with that.
It's a great question, Kelsey. And I wonder if there's not suggestions tonight, another idea might be to structure it a little bit differently. Because if you think about it, like conducting a specific equity audit could unearth those items. And so you could almost have that bullet. Then, you know, this could all work together if you think about it, like get involved every time you find unfairness, you know, get involved, conduct an audit to root out situations of disparate impact or lack of fairness, and then get after it. You know, you could, instead of offering those things right now, unless we know them, which we should point them out because we should fix them immediately, we could recommend the audit and let the audit drive that work. I had a couple conversations along those lines, so I don't know how the group feels.
Yeah, if I could jump in, Ryan Botkin again. I was thinking that maybe an audit or maybe having a consultant come in to, look at those policies would be helpful instead of maybe like a full-time paid position. Or maybe there could be a position, but they could add that responsibility or that role to that position. But yeah, I don't know if it's really like a full-time job. Maybe it's more of like more of an added role or like a temporary kind of audit kind of.
Thank you. Yeah. Currently at the city, under the, we nickname it our Title VI team, we have folks in each department that are identified to be, looking for inequities, looking for disparate impact, looking for things. and working within each department to correct anything that's located. So in some ways there's a team, but that's different from a whole scale audit. You know, been talking with some commissioners about firms or consultants that do that kind of work where they move through and examine, you know, do a review, kind of similar to perhaps what the police review just went through with the independent review.
Yeah, Gretchen, do we know the demographics of that team? I think it's important to know on that.
Great question. Yeah, great question. I could think about that for a moment because I know who's on it. Yeah, I could get back to you about that.
Yeah, because I think knowing who's on that team is very helpful.
Sure, yeah.
Or any more discussion when relating to question 3? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to move on to question 4, which states, recommendation to hold meetings at times when working class people can participate. This would vary dramatically. What would we suggest? I think the first question we should ask ourselves is, do people find it difficult at the current times? Do we see that people are finding a difficulty in seeing the meetings already? I think that's a good question to start with.
I am aware of one consistent demographic that struggles with evening meetings, and that's people who are up in years, people who don't feel comfortable traveling at night, find the evening meetings difficult. And then the contrary is there's people who are caring for children or employed during the day that prefer the night. And so that's been the tug and pull that I've been conscious of or aware of. I don't know if the recommendation in here about opening, continuing to have meetings be virtually accessible might help for those who are uncomfortable traveling at certain times or can't leave at certain times. That might help with that. I'm not sure. I'm sure it would depend on the person and their Wi-Fi and internet access, etc. But yeah, it's tough because you could have people working on Saturdays or Mondays or evenings or swing shift or graveyard or daytime. So there had been a recommendation in here to make that recommendation, but it's like, well, what exactly do we recommend? That was tough to figure out.
I almost think that the timing is a little bit of a red herring when we talk about people who, and the term working class can mean a lot of different things, but I think particularly of people who are lower wage earners who may have to carry multiple jobs in order to survive. And I think that the question for those folks is, how can they be engaged in community process without big asks of their time? Because it's just not appropriate to ask somebody who's fighting for their life to survive to come and sit in a what is essentially a business meeting. So I don't know the answer to that, but I think it drives at accessibility, and it has to do with how do you make the community aspect of it accessible, and the aspect of it of getting people's input and feedback accessible. And maybe it's less about, for me, when the meeting is held.
You know, that's a great point.
I
I know yeah, go please, Angelo.
Okay, I was just gonna say I agree with Mike, because it's not so much of when the meeting is, because most of these jobs, your schedule changes every week. And so you can't just have one specific day, because it might work one month, but it might be different the next month. And so that's, I think it's not so much of when these meetings are, because it's probably going to be an issue still.
Based on that discussion, I've got a suggestion to add a bullet under the recommendations document under communicate. Maybe it's under communicate, maybe it's under support. You'll tell me, but it's something like examine how can people engage in city process without a big ask of their time. Consider people who work many hours. Okay. Do you want it under communicate or under support? Or maybe it goes under represent. I don't know.
I like represent.
All right. We'll put it under represent.
And then Oni, did you have a comment? I saw that you turned on your mic.
I did. So I was thinking that, accessibility to these meetings are important. I don't, the time is going to fluctuate like what Mike was saying, but I think like there's a organization that I'm working with, and one thing that they came up with at the end of one of their sessions was that, we need to create a more diverse board, right? And in order to do that, we have to address the barriers that keep people out. And so us having this discussion about time is one of them, but also there was a discussion about maybe adding childcare to these meetings so that if people want to come whenever they work, whatever shift they work, that's a resource that's there, so it wouldn't be a barrier anymore. Or maybe, I don't know, when you feed people, people will come. No, we're in pandemic, I get it, but and making and inviting the community into these boards, and giving them the opportunity just to be present without, again, asking so much of their time.
Yeah, I love that, Oni, because I want people involved, but like pitching them on a 2-hour business meeting is kind of tough. So including something that's a little bit more reminiscent of like a community cultural gathering might be a great way to get people more involved and less like intimidated by a formal meeting.
It's a
Yeah, I
great
agree.
idea.
I think.
Please go. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say short. I think it's a great idea because I am personally, sometimes intimidated when there's long meetings and there's like people in suits. That's personally intimidating to me sometimes. And so if we, how the meeting looks is also important.
So I'm hearing something along the lines of adapt meetings to be more akin to a community cultural event. Consider including food and childcare, for example.
And I wanted to add, based on my own experience, for a long time, I wanted to be a part of boards and to help make a difference. But like Mike said, I was too busy surviving. I was a single mom with kids, and I was too busy surviving to even get to these meetings or even be a part of this kind of conversation. And so it's really important to take that into consideration. Is that the more we can reduce barriers and create more access for individuals to come in and invite them in, then the more you're going to get people talking about what needs to happen. I believe that, but it has to be inviting to them.
Thank you. Where would you put that in the recommendations document? That looks like a good add to the document. I'm wondering where do you want to see it show up?
It sounds like it would go under fun, wouldn't it? Because to create that's going to cost something, or to childcare, you know what I mean?
Yep. Got it.
All right, do we have any more discussion on number 4 for now?
Oh, there's the staff analyst. I thought it was somewhere. We put it on as on the list of questions. That's why it wasn't in the document yet. I was like, how did I lose track of that one? It's because it was flagged for discussion because a couple people had questions about it. Sorry,
Do
I
we have
jumped
any more
ahead.
questions now?
Yeah,
That's the fifth one. I think we solved that one. Yeah,
Well,
do
there
we
is
have
a
any discussion on 5? But I think we
it's expensive. I mean, each employee, is a chunk of change. I remember somebody asking me, so you guys have benefits and, paid leave, et cetera. Yes, we do, PERS, et cetera. So given the likelihood, I mean, it's unlikely probably, right, that 10 analysts would be added to the budget immediately. So given that budget reality check, is there a specific place of beginning to focus on? I think that was the question with that. That's right.
One thought I had about this is, there's currently one person at the city, we all know who it is, who works on these issues. And your title, Gretchen, I believe is something like Human Rights and Compliance Officer. How does your title read exactly?
Oh, thank you. Right now it's liaison on unsheltered residents and houselessness, and human rights and federal compliance manager. It's because I've also, Americans with Disabilities Act compliance, those kinds of things.
And I think what I've always wondered about that is whether the compliance aspect of your role is a bit, because it's called out so specifically in your job title, and there are some very specific things tied to compliance. What I've wondered is, I think what I've heard from community is that the city needs someone who's working on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Mm-hmm. Is sort of wrapped into your job, but is not actually part of your job title. And it seems like if you were only to get one, that you would want more of a generalist in that position and not necessarily specific, although our needs in Salem are so incredibly high around the race conversation that that to me would be an important factor in the decision. But my sense is that there's a missing piece around diversity, equity, and inclusion, at least formally represented at the city.
Yeah, I agree. And I also want to remind us, because I've confused this before, that DEI doesn't necessarily mean anti-racist. They're both very important. And I think that were they to create a position that was a generalist, we definitely want to include the specific language around both of those things, because we need both of those in Salem.
All right, so that would amend the discussion that we had earlier. Oh, and we added it to fund. So that would amend the language that we did under fund. Got it.
All right, any more discussion on question 5? Okay. Gretchen, do you need a moment and move on to the next one?
I am okay. I got it. Thank you for asking.
Okay. Number 6, can the commission review and acknowledge the community feedback received during this process and include themes and specific suggestions in the HRC work plan?
I was
Go ahead,
confused by that question because there is community feedback in the documents. Is there some community feedback? I mean, there was some community feedback that was frankly a little ugly, and I don't know that that advances us or moves us forward, or requires acknowledgement, maybe. But yeah, I was just confused by the question because there is quite a lot of community feedback in the document already.
So I'm kind of new to this process, but is there a plan? We did ask for feedback and it's in the document. Is there a plan to acknowledge back to those who provide the feedback that we got the feedback, we are taking it, and we're going to do these things, so that there's that feedback loop for those who provided some specific suggestions?
You know, that, Kathy, that's a really good question. For everybody that wrote in either, you know, through the city's channels or the school district's invitation channel, we sent a thank you so much, we've got it, and you know, we'll take a look, kind of a general thing without being committal one way or the other or getting into the substance. But Tricarico, Oni, you were key gatherers of feedback that went into this as well. And so I haven't, you know, other than a very brief conversation with Julianne once, I haven't talked with anybody about the receipt of the feedback. What do you think from the parts that you got?
Yeah, I mean, kind of similar to the discussion that's also in our paper about how we acknowledge public comment. I'd love to reach out to the folks that provided input and be able to say, hey, like, here's where your comments came into play. It'd probably take me a bit to go back through and do that all, but yeah, I appreciate that, Kathy, because I know that we felt in the past, sometimes there was a disconnect between someone coming us to it and saying something, and then depending on the meeting, it's kind of like, yeah, okay, thanks, and then we move on, and it can feel kind of like we're dismissing when that's not the case at all. So yeah, and I know that I had asked some people, you know, do you want your name on this document, or do you want me to say, you know, this is the community that was, you know, asked to provide feedback, and they most of the time were okay with their names being on it. So I think that might be another conversation of like, hey, we're going to submit this to city, you know, what acknowledgement do you want or need in order for us to give credit where credit is due? Because yeah, Oni and I put a lot of work in this, but it's not all us. There's a lot of people that were involved in this.
I don't necessarily think it has to be specific. If people want to remain anonymous, just so that they can see that we're doing something with their feedback, that it didn't just go into a black hole and we dismiss them, that there's something happening. And maybe that's just part of the process, but we haven't gotten there yet.
Mm-hmm.
I think the way I'm picturing submitting this, and so let me double check that we're all on the same page, is that there would be 3 documents that are submitted: the cover letter, the recommendations with the bullets, you know, that we've been talking about with the categories. And then I thought maybe I would put all of the feedback that we received into one PDF and title it community feedback, and then just let it roll so that there's not like 6 documents or something. There could be subheaders that maybe say how it came in, if that would be helpful. But I wondered if that, and then that way, I remember early on, we talked about helping the mayor and council to see the totality of what came in. but it's up to all of you. But I think that's what I'm working from right now. So please correct me if you'd like to see it done differently.
That sounds good. And then I think, whatever we decide to move forward, we can reply directly to those folks. I'd be happy to say, hey, here's what we're proposing. And we also are including your specific feedback so that the city can see it without our filter.
All right, any more discussion on question 6?
I don't have any more on question 6, but I'm wondering, can we go back to 4 for a minute? I had a thought about when we were talking about what can we do to include people who may not otherwise be able to participate. And in looking at the recommendations, Gretchen, I think you were going to put something under fund, but that list is pretty long. And I'm just wondering if there's maybe room for another category, something along the lines of include or invite or engage. I don't know, just a thought about, because I don't want to lose it in the list.
That's a really good point. And I don't know if represent could be adapted too, because that strikes me as related. Or we can do one separate that, like you said, engage.
They do seem related to me, but I'm not sure represent really gets to what the point was earlier. Yeah. But maybe they could be merged into a new one.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you, Kathy, because I don't think that fund is the major mechanism of that. It's a relatively low cost compared to some of the other fund asks. Like a position at the city is pretty high cost. A little bit of childcare and some food is pretty low cost. So I like the idea of engage or invite, something like that.
Great. I'll just add a bold engage and then pop that there if that sounds good.
Okay, anybody have any further discussion, feedback, questions on any of these 6 questions? Okay, hearing none, Gretchen, what would be our next step? I know we discussed this a little bit by email. I know we discussed a little of if we were ready to vote, to send this to council.
Yeah, that's correct. I'm thinking that we made some adds and some changes, and so yeah, you read my mind. I was just thinking about the choices. One idea would be I could make the edits as described and send it out and ask everybody to take a look at it. Well, I would do that regardless. And then I think you could do one of 2 things. I think you could vote to approve as amended, but then I won't submit to our elected officials until folks have, like, until there's like a period of time, like take a look at the edits. And if there's slight edits that appear unsubstantial, I would just make those, kind of a thing. Or, I could just edit the document per the discussion, and then, and in recognition of we're missing a few members tonight, and then we could just have this on the agenda for the next meeting. That also gives time if Tricarico wants to share back with some of the folks that they've talked to, for example. And so we could just amend the document, get it out to you all for thought, discussion, etc. And then that could be an agenda item for the May meeting, as a vote item. That's also fine. It gives you time to consider if the tone is right, if we've hit we're balancing a few, if you look carefully, we're balancing a number of issues and policy thoughts in here. And so it gives you more time to reflect on if we're hitting it right.
All right, looks like Mike and Tricarico are in agreement to move that into the May agenda. Oni, any preference on that?
Yeah, the May agenda is fine.
Okay, David?
May agenda sounds good.
Okay, Kathy?
That sounds good. That way we have time to think a little bit more on it before it goes forward. Is that going to create a problem with the budget process though? If there was there something we wanted them to consider before June? Is that too close?
Yeah, that's absolutely the question. I mean, honestly, ideally, budget ideas come in the fall because they can be worked and developed and get embedded in the draft budget that the city manager prepares for the budget committee, which is before the budget committee tonight, However, we do have an unusual year with the federal dollars coming in and the rules not all being in place yet for those dollars. And so there's going to be conversation about allocations for those additional dollars. And that's going to be a conversation that extends differently than the budget, and that's all still getting thought through. So, it's a good question.
And Gretchen, it sounds like for some of the smaller items that have come up, it's just been worked out through, you said the mayor and city manager office's budget, if there's been a small cost. So that is still a possibility if something comes up that we want to do that there's not a dedicated budget for.
Yeah, I think it depends on what we're talking about. Like we were able to get funding to buy a pop-up banner. I'm sure printing of brochures, if we do the safe space program, and printing of decals will be doable, but stipends for artists, that, for example, could be larger than what's in the budget and may not be doable, for example. So I think it would depend on the size of the item. Certainly there's no extra positions in the budget, that kind of a thing. But with those ARPA dollars coming, there's some space to consider some ideas that, yeah. I guess a third idea, I don't know if you're comfortable with this, but I guess a third idea is to submit in draft form to kind of give a little bit of a sneak peek of ideas to the elected officials. That has pros and cons to it, but that's another idea.
I know in my world that we do a lot of budgeting, and our budgets it's a longer process. And our big asks are unlikely to see movement this year, and it wouldn't matter between April and May. Some of those big asks, but and I suspect the city is similar to the place where I work.
Yeah, I agree that it wouldn't make much of a difference. And so I am okay with us moving this till May as well.
Great.
And then finally, Kelsey, any thoughts on this? I know I didn't call on you.
I'm happy to move it to May.
Gretchen, it looks like we're including this in the May agenda. Then.
Sounds good. Thank you. I'll still try to get the edited document out to you on the early end, and don't hesitate to send me corrections if I've goofed something up.
Okay, any more discussions on this topic for now?
Yeah, I'm going to say something. So I sit on, I sit and have sat on a lot of boards, having a lot of conversations about racism. And the work is not only hard work, but it's heart work also. You know, as I look over this document, if I were to name this document, I would call it Equity Ask, because although we've called it recommended actions, this document also asks some things of our community, right? As a whole, some things that has not happened. This document is asking for that. You know, my grandmother, she would say that this document is like a cold glass of sweet tea on an Arizona hot summer day. It's really good. In other words, I appreciate it because Tricarical knows I talk about a lot about what's next, what's the next ask, what's the next how. And to be a part of this process, and to see this in writing, there's a lot of hope in there. Like I could take this document and I could take it to my kids and I can say, look, this is what the city is looking at. It's for us. This is for our community. This is what they want to do. So don't give up. If you ever feel like it's really hard, it is hard. You're right, it's hard. And if your heart hurts, yep, your heart's gonna hurt, but don't give up. And so to be sitting here with this group of people, reading this document and in this whole planning process and implementation process, I'm really grateful. And it's the small wins, and this document is a win. It's a win because now they can have some clear, concise things, what we think as a community needs to happen so we can flourish. We all can flourish. I know we can. We just have to find out a way to do it together, right? So again, good work, HRC. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, I echo that. Thank you everyone for your work. This is not an easy task. This is huge. You know, we all had to put in a lot of extra hours. I know Gretchen worked really hard on gathering everyone's thoughts. So seriously, thank you everyone for your input on this. You know, this is going to be so cool, and I'm so grateful to be a part of it and to have all of you here with us.
It felt sometimes like threading a needle, you know, blending some, you know, some different perspectives. And I'm guessing all of you saw that. And so I hope you won't hesitate if you're like, you know, I'd like to hit that one different. I like basketball analogies. You know, that pass didn't make it. Like it was that, you know, that was too tight of a pass, and now you've got a turnover. Like that's so. If you know, please don't hesitate. And if this isn't a comfortable forum, but you're really not liking one of the if one of the passes was a turnover, do tell me, and then we can work on it together.
Yeah, I think, you know, just echoing what everybody said, this was a group effort, you know, and a win, as Oni said, but hopefully not our only win. I hope to see, more wins in the future as well. And because this is just the beginning, it's just a start. Again, thank you to everybody that was a part of this. All right, and I think it's a good segue to our next item, which is task forces and project updates, because we have, I think, a lot to talk to, because last meeting we couldn't get to many of these. So, Mike, awareness.
Yeah, really cool things going on with the Awareness Task Force. We are fortunate to be engaged again with another class from Western Oregon University that's going to do another community survey with us and for us. This is the third community survey. So there was one in 2017, one in 2020, and this will be our third time going out around a lot of the same questions will be asked, so that we can benchmark it against the previous surveys that have been done. This time we were fortunate to get a lot of really good community input into not only the distribution of the survey, but the content from last time. Some of our goals include getting a higher percentage of respondents in Spanish. We know that we have a large Spanish-speaking population in Salem, and they were not very well represented in the last survey. There's also a desire to simplify some of the concepts and the language in the survey to make it more accessible. We got feedback specifically from the community member who helped us distribute about 37 surveys last time to our unsheltered residents, that some of our language in the survey might have been a barrier to people just even understanding what question they were answering. So we're making some improvements to that as well. A group of us got to meet with the students last week. And that's always just a really exciting and fun opportunity to hear their questions and their perspectives on how to make the survey better. So really just looking forward to that work. I believe that the timeline, and Gretchen, you're going to have to help me here because I don't have a document that spells out the exact timeline. But essentially the survey is going to run in May with a report out in June. And that kind of follows the students' semester or class time anyway. And all of that will get sent to you as commissioners around what, when we send the survey out, and when the results will be available for reporting out. Now, last time when we did the survey and we released the results, there was a little bit of media interest. We got a great article in the Salem Reporter, and I'm hopeful that we'll get a little bit of interest in this survey as well. Particularly, it'll be particularly interesting to see what we see. This is obviously a very unusual year. When the previous survey was released in early 2020, it reflected pre-pandemic attitudes and opinions. And so it'll be really interesting to see how this experience of the pandemic has affected people's experiences with discrimination in the city. The Awareness Task Force continues to chug along on some of our other types of communications that we endeavor to do later in the year. But I think for now, we're going to be pretty focused on the survey for at least the next month or so. And that's all I got. Any questions?
And Mike, I have a question for you. I know last time we were talking about maybe doing paper copies of the survey if there was enough interest. Is that the case, or are we seeing any interest, or how's that going?
Yeah, so last survey we did distribute, like I said, I think it was 37 or 38 paper copies. But the survey wasn't really designed for paper. So it was actually many, many, many pages long because it was an online survey that just got printed out. They're actually, I think, going to try to make sure that the format of the printed survey is a little bit better this time. And Linnell Wilcox was our community volunteer that went out and took the survey to unsheltered residents. And this time, they're actually going to work with and train the students to gather that survey information. So Linnell is actually going to take some students out with her and show them, how she goes about gathering that. And it's a good experience for the students. It allows them to capture that data firsthand and really hear the voices for themselves of the people who are contributing to it. The survey is important from a quantitative perspective, right? We want to know how many people in Salem are experiencing discrimination. But I think the addition of the unsheltered residents and having the paper copies gives us a really interesting qualitative look at how people are experiencing. I mean, we can really start to hear their stories and start to even kind of hear their voices in some of the open field comments that are collected, which I think makes the survey richer. So yeah, definitely plans for a paper survey.
Mike, I have a question.
Yes.
Is Linnell the only one that takes it out to the unsheltered community?
She was this previous time.
Okay.
Yeah. But again, they're wanting to expand that and give the students the experience.
Because I think I sit in on a couple of groups that work with the unsheltered, and I think that if we made it known to them that we have a survey that we would like to get more unsheltered responses to, I think you would have some others that would be willing to go out and do that. So
that's great.
Yeah, when they did the point in time count survey, I think that's in January, but they had a couple of days where they had a whole bunch of volunteers come in, and it was an app on the phone that we sat and went through. So I think if there's more of a need, just we can do that.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
We did talk a bit about distribution of the survey. Last year, it was distributed through the city. It was available on the city website. It was distributed through the city Facebook page. This year, we're going to be able to take advantage. The city has a new Spanish Facebook page for Spanish residents, so we'll be able to advertise it through that. And we also talked with the students about our desire to distribute it out to some of our groups that are interested in the Human Rights Commission, some of our own email lists. And it sounds like the students and Marianne are open to doing that. They might just collect another little piece of data of how people heard about the survey to kind of control for any bias or differences between the different groups that the survey might get distributed to, if that makes sense. But it sounds like we're going to be able to expand our distribution channels, which I think is another really kind of exciting development.
All right, thank you, Mike. Any other questions regarding the awareness task force? All right, hearing none, we can move on to correspondence. I think we've put a pause on that one, right, Gretchen, for now? Because we don't really have anything for that one.
Yeah, that's correct. Honestly, I think we paused it, because we didn't want to keep asking for free stuff. As we were listening to the input that was coming in, the way this one had worked before is we just asked people to provide information and do trainings. And, sometimes that was just a part of a person's position that they did as part of their work and employment, and that was okay. But so we did kind of pause that, and there might still be some folks along those lines. Like, for example, one real appropriate one is we've always had the folks we had a couple of times, the folks from the Marion County District Attorney Victims Assistance Program come and provide good information about the financial resources that are available to certain crime victims and victimology in general. And that's an appropriate one. It fits within their work and the education that they do naturally, but there might be other trainings where we'd want to pause and identify a budget before asking someone to donate their time. So I think we got a little stuck there. But yeah, as time permits and as the budget develops, I think we'll be able to bring more back.
Yeah, and it kind of sucks that we had to pause correspondence, but I think it was the best, the right decision for right now to do that. And so if anybody doesn't have any other questions on that, we can move on to Equity Lenses / Chapter 97, Troy Carrico.
Yeah, so we do have the proposed equity lens. So that's one of your attachments. If you haven't had a chance, you can go ahead and take a look at it. We had a great discussion, Gretchen and Dr. Brown and I, about kind of the reasons why some of this stuff is in there. So if you have questions, I'm happy to try to kind of paraphrase, and Gretchen can assist me with that. But basically it's ready to go. So it's pretty serendipitous timing that, we have this ready so that when we send this recommendation to City Council, we have something right away that they can implement and start using, especially as they are addressing the things that we're asking them to address. This is going to be a really great tool to make sure that they're taking this seriously and, really keeping that equity lens in mind when they make decisions around that. So if anybody has any questions about that or wants to discuss any of the points on there, please go ahead and jump in now. I don't know, Gretchen, do we vote as a final group to adopt it? Is that another meeting? I don't know what that looks like.
I think that's up to all of you. If the group is ready to do tonight, then that would make sense. I mean, or you can take it as a part of the vote. You could either do it separately tonight, or you could take it as a part of the vote in May with the broader recommendations document. I think either one would be totally appropriate.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we have enough commissioners to vote on that right now, even if we wanted to.
Oh yeah, good point.
That's true. We've lost a couple folks off the Zoom for a moment.
Okay, and I'm happy waiting until May, and it can just be part of the recommendations. But yeah, if anybody has questions, feel free to reach out and chat with me or Gretchen or Dr. Brown, because we really enjoyed putting this together, and I'm excited to have it go to the City Council.
I thought it looked great.
Thank you.
Yeah, just looking.
And then I think as far as Chapter 97, once this recommendation is over, that'll be an ongoing conversation with City Council. As well as, isn't that a regular thing that we do anyway, Gretchen? I feel like that's not necessarily a new thing.
Yeah, we've offered amendments to Chapter 97 a couple of times in the Human Rights Commission's history. And there is a question about an amendment to Chapter 97 in the cover letter of the recommendations document around the housing status.
Mm-hmm.
That one hit the question list instead of the recommendations list because there's so much case law going on right now that relates. So it seemed appropriate. It seemed premature to make it a recommendation without being conscious of the legal landscape. And so, yeah, kind of underscoring your point, it's sort of an ongoing bit of work.
Yeah, so do we need to consult with our city lawyer before we start creating language around that? Or do we need to wait till we hear back from City Council? Like, what would be our next step on that?
Yeah, to me, consult with a lawyer, and that's basically what we're doing with asking on number 4.
Okay.
To me, that's going to get referred to our city attorney, and we've already kind of started those conversations.
Okay, cool.
When it
And
came
that's
up
all I
on-
have for that one, and I'm excited to move forward on that.
Thank you, Tricarico. Any discussion, questions on that topic? Okay, looks like we will vote on that next on the May agenda, and then we can move on to the LGBTQIA plus intersectional rights task force. Mike.
We had a great meeting at the end of March and continued just to plod away at working on our Safe Spaces project. I think various of us, including myself and Tricarico and our other task force member who comes regularly, left with some homework for us to do. And I can't remember off the top of my head what that homework was. So as soon as those minutes are ready, Gretchen, I'm ready for them. In addition to safe spaces, we're starting to come upon the summer months. And so the task force will be, I think, considering how we might support or be a part of any LGBTQIA pride events that happen during the summer. Of course, we endeavor to plan for Transgender Day of Remembrance, which is in November, but we had planned to start the planning process for that a little bit earlier this year. So we'll probably start that in July. But other than those things, we are just humming right along. I think the next work product that you all will see out of our task force is really kind of our next phase of the safe spaces, with some of the more detail fleshed out about what we're hoping to do there. Did I get everything, Tricarico and Gretchen?
All right, thank you, Mike. Any questions regarding that? I just think the task force is doing a great job on the Safe Spaces project, and I'm hoping to see more of that in the future. Okay, next looks like it's Unsheltered Neighbors. Both of those commissioners are not here with us tonight. So Gretchen, do you have any updates on that?
Oh, at once 1,000 and none, probably. The commission group itself hasn't met or worked on the issue. I know the Willamette students study that interviewed organizations around inclusion has come out, and I believe you've received it. And if I didn't forward it to you, please do let me know and I can resend that. But they called it the PACE group, and they completed their document and have done that study. So that's been done. But one of the other hats I wear at the city is to work on the issue. So I certainly have been working on the topic, but not precisely with the commission. So that's something that we could be taking a look at, is what, exactly what role or how do we want to interface with it. And I know at the beginning, it's probably focusing in on these questions about Chapter 97 and how we want to move forward with that. And it's great also that we're gathering information about discrimination specifically from our residents who are unsheltered. That'll be another good pathway in that might generate some tasks that fit within the Human Rights Commission's scope and area of interest. I'm quite preoccupied right now with locating alternative shelter locations. That's a significant need in our community right now, and I've been quite preoccupied with that question. So if anybody's got land, let me know.
Angela, can I make a quick comment? So I've been sitting in on meetings occasionally of, I think they call themselves the Coalition of Advocates for the Unsheltered of Salem. Is that right, Gretchen?
That's right.
They used to be the Homeless Coalition. And I know that there's a lot of interest because I hear it mentioned at the meetings about what the Human Rights Commission is doing. And so I think there's, I don't know what the connection is there, but I think there's some potential for some connection between the two groups. So
I think you're right, Kathy. I've just begun attending that meeting regularly. I've attended the last 2 now. And so my intention is to be there every month, both to learn from the discussions as well as answer questions that might come up.
Yeah, I just, at the last meeting, I think 2 different people had mentioned the Human Rights Commission as being something that they were interested in following what the commission is working on. So
Yes, thank you. Any more questions, comments? All right, and finally, youth outreach. Nathan's not here with us, but what I know is they're pretty busy right now because they're gonna start integrating in-person learning here in the coming weeks, and so Nathan's probably busy, as he's the senior class president for South, and so he must be busy doing that. So I don't blame him. So yeah, staff updates, Gretchen.
I have one. Couple of you mentioned, or this has come up in a few conversations in the past about when we receive public comment at meetings, interested in some thoughts or ideas or language as we experience the public comment, ideas of things to say, approaches, etc. So Angelo and Krista asked for a little bit of information about that whole area. And I engaged a colleague of mine and asked her help in drafting something, and that's attached as one of your many attachments tonight. So I just wanted to point that out to you. And then of course, if there's anything different you're looking for, or you'd like more information, or you'd like it to be an agenda item, we can always make it an agenda item, but it's essentially an offering of information at this point. But other than that, I don't have any other staff updates.
And thank you, Gretchen, for that document as well. Okay, community calendar. Do you have any updates on that?
No, I couldn't find anything again. And I don't know if it's just that in this new social media world, if I'm just not reading the right pages, or if it's the pandemic, but I'm coming up short and would welcome folks sending me stuff, or if anybody wants to help with that, because I couldn't find anything again. And I don't know if it's just me, but I couldn't find anything.
What type of events are you looking for the calendar?
Yeah, I could send out a past example if that would be helpful. Traditionally, the Human Rights Commission has wanted to be apprised of community events that relate in some way, either to the issue of human rights or to the communities or identities that we serve or pay attention to, or in other words, the protected classes in Chapter 97. And they've been both like if there's an event, like maybe a critical event that relates to debating theory about the issue, that's welcome. Or if it's a positive celebration of a particular culture, that's welcome. We've tried to keep it to Salem, because there's a lot of stuff that happens in other communities, and given our limited capacity, we've tried to focus in on stuff in Salem. So, but everything from World Beat to a community forum to the Marshallese annual picnic, back to school picnic might show up on there.
Okay.
The booth is still in my garage, so
yeah.
Been there for a long time.
Do you want it in there still, or should we help you?
No,
with
it's fine there. It's probably more trouble to drive it over to the city and get it all unpacked for the next time to come pick it up.
Great. Well, thank you for storing it.
All right, if nobody else has any other community calendar events, we can move on to member remarks and announcements. Basically, if anybody has anything to say, this is the time to do so. Okay, hearing none, I wish you guys a good night. See you in May, and then this meeting is adjourned then.
Night.
Ready?